You're listening to the Multifamily Mentor Show.
My name is Terrence Doyle.
And I'm Chris Lopez. You probably know us from the BiggerPockets Real Estate Ride Along Show. Well, now we're talking everything multifamily. We bring in top industry experts from around the country to come join us in our Denver studio for an in-depth, in-person conversation.
We're going to be diving deep into deals, underwriting, raising capital, and everything in between. Join the conversation.
What's up, BiggerPockets? We've had a great multifamily mentor show today. This is our first episode in our two-part series. We got a great interview today. We're going to walk a property and go to a bunch of details about building deep relationships so you can go out there and crush it investing in multifamily. My name is Chris Lopez. I got my co-host Terrence Doyle. Terrence, how are you?
Super well, Chris. Excited to be here. We have an awesome guest. She flew into Denver yesterday. We got a chance to spend some time in our office and just was really impressed with how you built everything. And Kimberly Marie, welcome to the Multifamily Mentor Show.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. I appreciate it.
So a little bit of background. I know that you left high school, went to pursue a career in tennis, then ended up getting your doctorate degree in physical therapy, and now are a full-time real estate investor. And so take us back to the beginning, talk about your family, how you got into real estate, and some of the things that really drove you to want to create your own business and be a real estate entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure. So from the beginning, my family on my mother's side was in real estate, my grandma and my uncle. My grandma was born in Japan, and my mom immigrated when she was 7. So no English, no money, nothing. She started, I think she had like 2 properties in Tokyo, and then moved to Chicago where she had like a couple of small multifamilies and just sold them and just kept buying and selling. So I didn't really understand it at the time, but she would come over every day and took care of my sister and I while my parents were at work. And so sometimes we'd go to properties with her. But again, I was really young, didn't really understand it. And then my uncle was in real estate in California, but when I got into it later in life, I felt like I needed to know a little bit more before going to him and asking him questions, because I was like, I don't even know what to ask right now.
Right.
So I need to like get some more background knowledge before going to him. And then I ended up just never going to him until I actually built something. And then I was like, oh, hey, like, here's what I'm doing. What do you do? And it was just kind of happened like that. But yeah, that's the only family I have.
I love the immigrant background story. I think so many people can relate to that. I think that when you come to this country with no money, no English, no network, and you really have to like figure things out on your own, it forces you to like think outside the box and like give it everything you have from day one, and you have nothing to lose, so you can take more risk. And I think that that's one of the things I love about, my parents coming over here from South America. And I know that there's a lot of other people in real estate that came over from, either from Europe or Asia or South America that had nothing, no money to their name, and have built incredible careers and lives by, having that background of nothing to their names when they arrive in this country. And that's one of the amazing things about our country and about real estate is you can do anything you want if you're willing to hustle and sacrifice and put in the work and take some risk. So I think that that's really cool. So talk to us about, you're in high school and you're playing tennis, and, that process of leaving, being around some other people, expanding your network and really observing, some successful high net worth families and getting your mind really thinking about real estate and cash flow.
Yeah. So when I was 16, I really wanted to be like a pro tennis player, at least play in college. So I like begged my parents, like, please, 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 can I go to this academy? And so I went. And when I was there, I knew right away that I was not like these people. Like I was a very middle class family, and these people were very, very high net worth, like people. And it was 2008. And so once I got there, my parents lost their job. My sister is now a doctor, and so she was in college, and so we're both away from home. And then I'm at this academy that we paid all this money for, and then I ended up getting injured like a month later, so I was even off the court for a while too. So it was like, and I'm 16, and so I was like, geez, what is going on right now? And the people who I was around was like, oh, like, good luck on the tournament this weekend, and just like, oh, where are you guys going tomorrow? And just had no idea what was happening. I was like, this is like 2008. Like, are you guys like not affected by anything? So it really kind of opened my eyes like, wow, like how did these people build something like this to where 2008 never even like rattled them even a little bit? And so I was like, all right, I need to do something like this somehow, some way in my life. I don't know what that's going to be, but we'll kind of see. So I've always just kind of been an entrepreneurial mind from there. Like my first business was actually a fitness business. And so I did that through PT school. But I got into real estate originally when I went back to get my doctorate degree. So I did a 2-year program for PT. I was a PT assistant. And then once I was working, I was like, man, I really want to be the doctor of physical therapy. So I calculated it out. It was a 3-year program. It was going to be $100,000. And I'm like, geez, like, how am I going to pay this off again? Because I had originally paid off my loans all from undergrad before. So that's when I was like, you know what? I'm going to flip houses. And that's right when I bought my first primary residence in like a really great area of Indianapolis. And so I was like, oh, like people are flipping here. I could do this. And so I really just dove in and just immersed myself, became obsessed with like learning everything about my neighborhood. I would walk every single street, wave at everybody. Like, you know, if there was a house that was under construction, I would like meet the crew and like walk through, but no one would kick me off the site. I didn't really look that threatening. So it just kind of happened from there that way.
And how did you pick Indianapolis?
So I went to school there. I went to University of Indianapolis. I did get a tennis scholarship for D2, and it was a really good PT program. And I grew up in Chicago, so it was only like 3.5 hours. So I always thought I'd go back to Chicago. It was just like where I'm going to go to school, get my degree, and then come back. But then I just never ended up leaving because once I was older, I was like, I would never be able to buy a property in Chicago for one, where I bought in Indianapolis for the price, the taxes, the politics of like Illinois, like all this stuff like didn't make a lot of sense. And so I was like, oh, I'm just going to do this here in Indy. So just ended up staying.
So why'd you start with flipping though? Because I mean, that just seems 180 degrees.
Yeah.
You know, you're going down. You also had the bug from your tennis academy experience of seeing, you know, what other people have done. You're going back to school. I mean, why flipping? Why? Because that's not the typical mindset for people. How do I pay off student debt or future student debt?
Yeah, I think I just was in the environment. So the neighborhood is Fountain Square. And so even still, it's really hot for flips. And so I bought a flipped home. And so around me, though, it was still gentrifying, you know, like 6-7 years ago. And so I was like, you know, a single small framed female. I'm like, am I safe in this neighborhood? Because when I knew Fountain Square, when I moved for undergrad, you would not go there. Like I got lost one time with my dad when he moved me into my dorm and we ended up in Fountain Square. And we were like, can we park here? Like, is this safe? And so that was my idea of the neighborhood. And then I ended up finding this house. And I'm like, I don't know. And so after I bought it, I just was looking still as a consumer, like, who is around me, what houses are flipping, who is moving here. Like, and I met all my neighbors. So my one neighbor, worked for Eli Lilly and was like, oh, that guy's a lawyer. That young couple's a teacher. They're personal trainers. And so I was like, oh, okay. So like, what about that house? I'm like, oh, that's whoever, they've lived here for 25 years. And so I was like, okay, so like these people look crazy, but like they're not really that threatening. And so I was like, okay. And so I just like learned about the neighborhood. And so I would see everyone flipping. And so I was just like, oh, I can do this then. Like, and so I just started walking every single house as a consumer. Like after it was done is obviously what I started with. Cause when I was shopping for turnkey homes. Then I would be like, oh, this one's $50,000 and it's like burned down. What does this look like? And then I would see it go off the market and I'd see it come back on the market and then I'd walk it afterward too. I'm like, oh wow, I could do this. Let's just see what happens. So just from that.
I love how you started with flipping. I did the same thing in 2008. I was buying single family homes at the Publix trustee sale here in Colorado. And that was my first like experience into real estate. And then was able to, you know, transition into multifamily once I figured out like how the game is played and, you know, cash flow versus just like one time flipping.
Yeah.
You know, and make it. So walk us through like kind of that transition for you. You know, you're flipping homes, you're in college, you're paying off debt. Tell us some of the highs and lows. And then what was the pivotal moment that was like, okay, I want cash flow. I want passive income. There's got to be another option. I'm going to turn to multifamily.
Yeah, the pivotal point was when I sold my first flip. So I projected, like, I was like, I want to make 50 to 60 grand, and I hit it right on the nose, and so that knocked out half my debt.
Your first flip, you made 50 grand?
Yeah.
Wow, most people don't make most people make $5 on their first flip. You made 50 grand. Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Like I said, I literally obsessed about the area. So yeah, so I hit it right on the nose. And after that, I knocked out a ton of my debt, and I was like, okay. And at that point, I had bought a lot of the other houses on the street that looked really bad. And so when I was selling this one, and it was in an area that nobody would go.
And how were you buying them then? Because you're in college. Were you using private money? I mean, lines of credit. I mean, how were you doing that in college?
Yeah. So I had a lot of equity in my primary residence.
Got it.
So I like used a HELOC. I basically refinanced like twice or three times in the first 9 months of owning it.
Wow.
So my banker like hated me, but I would use the HELOC. And then when I was actually flipping, like my mom is like my best friend. And so I would just talk to her about what I was doing. Cause you know, you can't really like talk to like my normal college friends about like, oh yeah, I'm going to go flip a house. So I just tell my mom everything. And I had like a moment where I was like about to have cold feet. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I could do this. Cause my first flip, I put like 250 grand into it. It was like totally burned down. And so before that, I had all these tax liens and stuff. And I was like, oh, I owe $8 grand in 2 months. What am I going to do? And so I was just like, I think I'm just going to sell this house, make a couple $1,000s and be done. And she's like, no, like what's going on? Like, why? You know what you're doing. You've done your research. What is the problem? Why are you stressed? I was like, I don't know. I have to find $8 grand before, so the city gets off me, like all this court stuff. And so then she was like, okay, well, I'm your first investor then. Like, here's whatever, $8 grand, pay off the city and just keep going on your path. And so I was like, oh, wow, okay. And so then once she kind of saw like my process, what I was doing, she invested in me too. So between the two of us, we were able to scrape together the funds. We both sold all of our liquid brokerage accounts, like closed out all these stocks and stuff. She never touched her retirement, but I did. She was really mad at me for that. But, you know, so we just scraped it together and made it work in that first flip. And then when I hit it on the nose, she's like, all right, yep, I knew you knew what you were doing. You're my daughter. Like, I'm an investor for life, you know? So she just had my back after that.
So that's incredible. I love that. Getting your family involved, you know, betting everything you have on yourself. I mean, I think that's one of my favorite quotes from Kobe Bryant is always bet on yourself. Always bet on yourself. Walk me through the transition getting into multifamily. And you just made 50 grand. Like most people would be like, let me go flip 5 more houses and try and scale up like a flipping business. What was it that made you want to get into multifamily?
Yeah, because you were not passive, or I was not passive on the job
site. It's a full-time job.
Yeah. And once I knocked out half the debt, I was like, okay, cool. You know, one more of these and then I'm good. So now at that point, I was getting through my doctorate program probably like a year in. And I was like, man, like, I don't want to be doing this like during my rotations. And it was extremely hard, like, because I was working, traveling to Ohio for this program, like staying overnight in a hotel. Like, so I was like, I cannot be on site all the time and like dealing with contractors. I had a couple bad contractors that unfortunately went south. And so I was like, man, you know what? I really want something more passive. And so that's when I started buying rental property. So my first rental property was a single family on the same street that I actually had my primary residence on. So again, I was a consumer first. So I was like, oh, like someone like me would want to come live here. There's a fence, there's a garage, there's a shed, you know, it's 3 bedrooms. Like someone would totally want to live here because I would live here, you know?
Right.
And so once I got a couple rental properties under my belt, I was like, wow, this is cool, but why am I doing so much work for just 1 or 2 doors? Like you work. Okay, like get the bank lined up, get all the financing, and then it's closed. Sweet. But now what? I'm like, okay, well, I want something more. I wanted to scale. And so that's when I started getting into multifamily. And I was like, okay, if I do all this work and close like 50 doors, then I would be like, okay, this is more passive. And then I knew when I would have to quit my job for my rotations, I'd be able to like support myself because I was already an adult. So, I mean, an underlying theme I see here, Kimberly, is like you definitely did not overthink things. You didn't get stuck into the paralysis by analysis mode that so many people do, especially newer investors get into. You kept it very simple and you always put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, which I think is a great takeaway for viewers and listeners out there who want to, replicate what you're doing. But what was like the tactical stuff you did to go from single family to multifamily? Because obviously there's a different game there. Yeah.
What was like the kind of like the first steps you did?
Oh man, I guess just immersing myself in a multifamily world because the single family flippers and buyers are totally different than like the multifamily brokers and the people who are doing multifamily. Like, so I think I originally just started in Indianapolis going to like a lot of like multifamily meetups and like meeting like hard money lenders, which I never really needed for flips, and, just different people who syndicated. I had never heard that word before. I was like, oh, what is all of this? And so I just kind of started learning more about it. And the more I learned, the more I was like, yeah, this is exactly in line with my goals. And so throughout this whole process, I was really like, my broker is very close to me. And so I was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Like, I want to start buying multifamily. And my broker already was like learning about multifamily as well. And I was like, yeah, like totally. And so I gave him basically like what I was thinking was my criteria. And he brought me a deal within like 2 weeks. I was like, hey, this is perfect. This is what you want. I was like, perfect. Put in an LOI. So we just locked it up right then and there.
So you made that sound very simple. Let's back up a little bit. I mean, most people don't do it that quickly. That's amazing, but let's back up. So let's talk about brokers. So this is one of the things that we're gonna, in the second episode of this show, we're gonna highlight you meeting with a broker here in Denver, and we're going to go through what a typical conversation looks like when you're dealing with a new broker. But talk about going back then, what were the tactical things that you did or the nuances around getting a broker to go and find multifamily deals for you? And let's go deep into that, because I think that's one of the questions I get all the time, right? With some of the deals I do is, hey, how are you finding these deals? How are you able to source these off market? How are you able to get them so quickly? How are you able to do deals that like we can't do, but we hear about and want to be able to do? So talk about, first of all, being a female in the market, right? And how, difficult that is. And then two, like getting brokers when you're new to multifamily and you're, the age that you were. Like, let's go through that for the audience, because that's something we always hear about is like, how can I do my first deal?
Yeah.
So let's talk through like the broker and how you were able to get them motivated and they had confidence in you that they would spend the time and you'd be able to close on a deal that they would bring you.
Yeah, 100%. So I would say for me, like just showing like your work ethic, basically, like you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to get something done. And I think the broker that I work with saw what I was doing with my flips, because he was the same broker to sell my flips as well. And so he saw like, hey, like she is super motivated, super educated. I'm like on site all the time, like finding out what finishes other people are putting in the houses, this and this and this. Like we set the market over in that neighborhood, like by a lot of money. I can't remember exactly the dollar per square foot, but so once I did that with him, like we kind of grew together and was like, okay, he was young, newer to the city. I was young, newer to the city, newer to real estate. And we're like, hey, you know what? You can take over this aspect of the business. I can take over this aspect of the business. Like if we put our faith in one another, like, hey, like bring me deals. I promise I will close them for you. I will do whatever it takes. And kind of just like finding like someone who will hustle with you rather than someone like if I went to someone who's been doing this for 15 years and had like, 20 clients that they would send stuff before me, I don't really think they would be that interested in like finding different ways to find deals and like being creative and like taking a chance on me, right? But I found that broker that would. And like, I feel like a lot of like what I would do would be paving my own path. Like I didn't read one real estate book before I flipped or before I bought an apartment or nothing, like literally. So I was just like figuring it out on my own, like based on the city that I was in and based on what I was good at and what I was around and what I had access to, so if I were to go to someone who had everything already set and like, oh, you're supposed to do this and then you do this, like maybe they wouldn't have like trusted me or given me the time really to be like, no, like I think this is going to work. Like, let's try this out and do it. What do we have to lose? Like, and I promise you, I will do everything I can to close it.
I think this is a great message for the audience, especially young investors out there that want to get started. Maybe they're in high school, maybe they're in college, maybe they're like you, they're going to medical school and they're looking for ways to create more income, is that you don't have to do things by the book, right? Some of the first deals I did in Des Moines, multifamily, a residential broker sent to me, 4-unit, 8-unit,
Yep.
20-unit. Some of the better deals that we even did were just from a residential broker calling people in residential neighborhoods and finding people that wanted to sell. And so I think that's point number one, is you don't really have to, for larger deals, most likely it's going to be a commercial broker that's in it full time. Mm-hmm. But when you're starting out and you're looking for your first 8-unit or 10-unit, or in your case, 23-unit, it could be a residential broker.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to have a commercial broker. You could have a residential broker that has a lot of confidence and hustle, and they're willing to put in the work to go find the seller that's willing to transact with someone that's a new buyer. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that I want you to expand on is, you had one relationship that you built a really good rapport with, had ultimate confidence in each other, and you didn't need to have 10 different broker relationships that you're following up with every month. You had one key relationship, and that's who's ended up bringing you most of your multifamily deals.
Yeah, 100%.
And most people don't, most people think, a lot of people I hear is like, man, I'm talking to like 15 different people and I'm following up with them every week. And it's like, you may not have to do that. If you have one key relationship, that may be all you need.
Yeah, exactly. Because I would talk to other brokers. I'm always open to it. And like my main broker knows that too. It's like, hey, if they bring me a deal, I'm totally cool with it. And obviously, and I'll still talk to them. But I just feel like when I'm talking to them, it's like they're having the same conversation with me as they had with 10 other people that day.
Right.
And so I'm like, I really don't feel like they get to know me at all. I don't really get to know them. I'm like, would they prioritize me? I don't really think so. Even if I would try to say like, hey, like here's what I've done before, here's what I've closed. I just feel like it's so many things. And so I'm like, you know what? Like, and my broker is such a hustler. Any like deal that another broker's brought me, I've seen already before it was even on. And I already walked by and I already did all my research on it. I was like, and I would either pass on it or we've already called on them. So like I've literally like, at least in Indianapolis, like I've seen like almost every deal before it ever came on. And then if it comes on, I like hit them up like, oh, remember this one from 6 months ago? I guess they decided to sell. Like, you know, so yeah, I think it's definitely way more important to go deep with one person than go wide. But you really have to find the right person that'll be willing to do it with you too.
That's right. And you spent the time building that relationship. You guys had rapport, you had a track record together. And it doesn't really matter when you're getting started if they are a residential broker, which no one really talks about, but is a fact. If you're a hustler and if you know how to do deals, it doesn't really matter if all you've done is single family. You can do a multifamily deal. You know, and then I think that's part of like not having to like stick to the script, and you can think outside the box and get creative. It doesn't have to just be a commercial broker that all they've done is commercial. And sometimes the best hustlers and the people most motivated are the ones that are the underdogs that all they've done is single family and no one's really factoring them in or taking them seriously, you know?
Yeah.
But they're willing to blow up the phones and go the extra mile that maybe some commercial brokers that are more set in their ways and not willing to do that, the last 10%.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, building a relationship with residential brokers is a good thing, especially if you're trying to transition from single family to multifamily. Get your best residential broker and be like, hey, let's go call on all the 20 unit deals that haven't sold in the last 10 years in your market. I mean, that's a great way. That's kind of how we started in Des Moines. Hey, let's take someone I know that I have a track record with. I know they're a hustler. They know the market. And let's just start calling on abandoned 10 and 20 units in areas that we like.
Yeah.
So now let's dive into your first deal. So your first deal he brings you is a 23 unit?
Yes.
Okay, so walk me through how you underwrote it, maybe what you liked about the neighborhood, the unit mix, the price, all those kind of things.
Yeah, so when I bought it, so we closed in January of 2019, so a couple years ago now. I didn't really know how to underwrite. I didn't know what value add was at the time. So, I mean, we found this mom and pop owner that just became a grandpa, and it was literally the perfect storm of situation where it's like, do you want to sell? Yes, I do. I'm like, oh my gosh, perfect. And so, I was using this basic spreadsheet that he sent over in his financials. And so I was just like, huh. So I was like changing the numbers in the owner's spreadsheet. And I was like, yeah, all right, if I do this right, it's a 10 cap. So sure, I'll do it. And so I literally was like, no clue. I look back now and I'm like, how the heck did I do that? Like, you know, because I just like knowing what I know now, I just got very, very lucky, but I knew just enough, you know? And so I ended up, I underwrote it with that guy's spreadsheet.
What was the unit mix?
It was all 1 bedrooms and 1 studio.
So 22 ones and 1 studio. Do you remember what the rents were before you bought it?
Yeah, I think it was an average of $525 to $575.
Okay.
What was the market rent?
Like 6 something. So that's what I did. I just came in there and bumped rents. I didn't do any value add, nothing. And then I refinanced 18 months later, pulled all my money out, and was like, oh, this is what people are talking about.
So you didn't have to do any construction?
I did literally nothing to it.
Really?
Yeah, before I refinanced, other than just managed it better and bumped the rents. Because I, like I said, I was like psycho. I was like, who's renting where? Where's this neighborhood? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, why are these rents so low? Like, you can probably get way more in these rents. And then I did. And I was like, oh, okay.
So you self-managed from day one?
No. Actually, the owner managed for me for 6 months before I transitioned out.
Wait, post-closing he did?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, because he was managing, his daughter was managing 2 of their buildings, and this was just kind of like an oddball one. And he's like, well, you know, like, we'll manage for you for 6 months. We know this is your first deal, but, you know, just know that this isn't our goal. We'll give you a year to find somebody that you like, and then after a year, we're going to be done. And so in like 6 months, I was like, okay, I feel comfortable with this person who he recommended me to that managed the building like 13 years prior for him. So that's how it happened. So yeah, the owner managed for me for 6 months after closing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I've never been able to do that. Buy a building, not really do any construction and raise rent. So that's kudos to you. I mean, that's amazing. That's an incredible story. So you're raising rents. Talk about the debt, because to this point, I mean, when you're doing your first deal, this is a commercial loan, so not a resi loan. And banks are pretty difficult to deal with when you're doing your first loan. So talk about the financing.
The financing was actually, the guy was on our side. So this guy did like 3 or 4 of my residential loans prior. And so he already knew, like, you ask for my bank statements, you got money flying all over the place. Like, my income is crap because I'm never working as a PT at this point. So he's like, what the heck? But he knew me from my other ones, and like, I have great credit, so that helped. But I already had a relationship with this guy. And so when I brought him this unit, he's he's like, okay, like I know you're going to do what it takes to get this done. And so he really kind of put his head on the line for me. I remember it was like 5.75% interest, though. It was so high back then. But, you know, yeah, it was like a regular commercial loan, like no crazy.
How much equity did you have to bring?
For 25%.
So you did 75% of purchase price.
Yeah.
At 5.75.
Yep.
Fixed for 5 years?
Yeah.
30-year AM?
20.
20-year AM. Oh, so you're aggressively paying down debt. So
Yeah.
your payment was pretty high.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was.
Nice. And then, so 18 months later, you were able to refinance?
Yeah, I did. Because I bumped because at this point I actually had learned what multifamily was. And I was like, oh, like, okay, so let's apply this to my current building and see what I can do here. And so, yeah, 18 months later, I was like, wow, I can pull most of my down payment out. And then it turns out I pulled all of it out plus some. And
so what was the down payment?
So I put, it was like $625 purchase price at the time, which is crazy.
Right.
And I put like 160 down, I think, or 180 down.
And the 160 you got from the flips you had done, or a combination of flips and your mom, or how was that?
So yeah, so that
equity?
street that I started flipping on, I told you prior, like I bought a lot of the houses on the street, and then after I flipped one, I like wanted to buy more residential single families just for rentals, and so I actually sold off some of those flips to investors. And one of them that I sold, I literally made I sold it for like 125K. So I was able to just take all of that and then plus like something else, like just from like my HELOC to make that up. So I barely had to come to the table with anything.
Wow, amazing. So you came with 25% down. You're cash flowing every month?
Yeah.
You were cash flowing every month.
Yeah.
And then on month 18, you were able to get all your down payment, which sounds like it was roughly $175,000 or something like that.
Yeah, I pulled like $215 or $220 out.
Incredible.
Yeah.
What was the takeout financing like? Just another local bank loan? Did you go non-recourse? What was that
I
structure
refinanced with the exact same bank.
Okay.
Because they were going to make me pay like $10,000 of a prepayment penalty. But then they gave me like a 3.5 interest rate, 25-year AM, I think this time.
Wow.
And any other bank that I was going to take out and refinance to, it wasn't going to be agency or anything like that. So like the terms that bank gave me were worlds better. So my banker ended up leaving that bank that closed that loan. And so I wanted to obviously follow him. And he was like, I can't beat what they're giving you. Like, you should just stay. So I just refinanced and stayed with the same bank and just got my interest payment completely like lowered so much. It was like, yeah, to 3.5 or something like that.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, from 5.75 and then a 25-year AM. So yeah.
So you refinanced what? So 18 months after January of 2019. So what? Middle of COVID last year, you're refinancing?
Yeah.
Like August, September?
Yeah.
And then tell us what happened then, because it sounds like you're about to sell the deal and you're going to do another deal. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I'm always doing goals audits of, you know, I'm like working hard, hustling. But I always like to take a step back and be like, what am I actually working towards? Honestly, one thing I've learned about apartment buying is that, you know, you got to remember your goal, because like for me, this was my first building. So it was really hard for me to like wrap my head around like this building because it's obviously so ugly, but it makes so much money. And we did the value that we said. We did our little fixes that we said we were going to do. We bumped the values, we pushed rents, and now it's worth almost double in value. Now it looks like this, but super profitable building.
Yeah, because you bought it right.
Yeah.
And in real estate, when you make money, you make money when you buy.
Right. Yeah.
And you bought it right. That's how we do it.
And, you know, I want to be more free and I want to travel more and I want to not be so like, this is a C-class building. Like, these are very challenging tenants. My manager was very challenging after the original owner. Original owner was awesome. Oh my gosh, we could have kept him. That would have been great. But, you know, my other two managers after that were just really not great. And, you know, if I'm out of the country, I can't be dealing with a C-class building. Like, I was having to coordinate painters and cleaners and all this stuff for my manager. And so I'm like, you know what? Like, I really want a higher asset class at this point. And so when I looked at it again, I was like, wow, I can sell this again. I can totally sell this and make a lot of money again. And so I was like, you know what? It's time for me to just sell it. Could I do the whole value add and redo the building and do all this? Yes. But I was like, it's not really my goal. I would much rather buy something that's a little less of a heavy lift and, you know, better area and just kind of do that. And so I just decided to do that with the goals audit. And so from there, I'm looking at a deal, hopefully find out today if my LOI is accepted for 2 different buildings split up between 16 units that is like right next to downtown, like a mile south. I already own rental property on that same street. So hopefully I can just 1031 into that and just have less units, but easier tenants, better cash flow. So it's, I mean, even if it's not better cash flow, if it's less cash flow than the C class, I'm okay with it because I'm not going to have to constantly like be on the phone coordinating people and like dealing with tenants who are mad at 1 a.m. and breaking stuff, so that's kind of like just
why is your property manager doing that?
I know. Good question. I would love to know.
Well, I think that's a great point that Kimberly's bringing up is that, it's hand-to-hand combat in Class C properties. I mean, I think that's where most people start because that's where the best margins are, and that's not where most sophisticated investors want to play. That's a great sandbox to like learn the business, learn how to deal with tenants, learn how maintenance works, learn how leasing and renewals, and really learn the fundamentals of the business. But as you grow, what I'm hearing you say that a lot of people say, once they're in the game is, I really want more lifestyle. Yeah. And I want something a little bit more passive, even if the return isn't there. Maybe it sounds like the return on yours is like infinite now because you have no cash in the deal, but your return is going to be in the high 30, 40, 50 range. And maybe on a Class B or B plus property, maybe it's mid-teens. But what you get in exchange for that mid-teens is you get much more passive and a better quality of life.
Peace of mind.
Peace of mind, yeah. So I love that. And I think everybody has to make that decision. And you talk about a goals audit. We have to do the same thing with our team and say, hey, what are we really going after here? And so I think that's a great point to make that the audience needs to, once you get into it, you got to figure out and reassess, hey, what are my goals? What am I looking for? Do I want the highest return with maybe more work, or do I want maybe a little bit less work, enjoy my family more, and a lower return?
Yeah.
So those are great things to talk about.
So as we wrap up this episode, 2 final questions for you. One is, what is your superpower when it comes to real estate investing? What would you say you're something that unique that you bring to the table that makes you different and has helped you have success the last few years?
Yeah. I would say thinking as a consumer rather than an investor first, and really like learning the neighborhood so well, like who's living here, who owns businesses here, what kind of businesses are here, who wants to move here, what is the growth here, what does the city look at this neighborhood and say, are they allocating funds to it? Because a lot of times, a lot of my deals, like my first flip is a good example and my first apartment is a good example. They were both in neighborhoods that nobody would touch. And now everyone's like, oh, like, and they're all over there now. And I just saw it way earlier because I wasn't afraid to just park my car and meet some people and be like, okay, what's going on here? And, a lot of times it's like 1 or 2 houses or 1 or 2 people that are just grumpy or mean or whatever it is that make the whole neighborhood look bad. So I would look at deals and do deals that on a spreadsheet or on a map people would never touch, but I look at it completely differently. So I think I'm really good at that for sure.
And that feeds into exactly what we're going to do for episode 2 here. We're going to go walk a neighborhood, see you in action with the wave test, see how you evaluate all that. So that's going to be really fun. And also sit down and talk with a broker here in Denver, see how you build the relationship and go deep. All right, so viewers, if you like this, make sure you leave us some love, hit the like button, subscribe, leave comments. We'll be in there. Last question. How can people get a hold of you, Kimberly?
Yeah, so anyone can send me an email, kim@reddoorrenovation.com, or you can follow my Instagram, Kimberly Marie 920.
Awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. We appreciate it. And guys, we'll see you in the next episode. You're listening to the Multifamily Mentor Show.
Join the conversation.